Assess and mitigate the vulnerabilities in web-based systems. A web-based system provides access to a software system using a computer and internet connection. Web-based applications are installed and run on a remote server access with web browser. Web browsers are installed on computer and allow to access websites. Web browsers are Google Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge Opera, and others. Open Web Application Security Project, or OWASP, is an international non-profit organization dedicated to web application security. OWASP top 10 application security risks are: injection, broken authentication, sensitive data exposure, XML external entities, XE, broken access control, security misconfiguration, cross-site scripting, using components with known vulnerabilities, insufficient logging and monitoring, cross-site request forgery. Injection vulnerabilities. Injection vulnerabilities are flaws that allow attackers to inject malicious code in another system using an application. When an application accepts user inputs and allows these inputs to enter a database, shell command, or operating system, making application susceptible to an injection flaw. These flaws are a result of insufficient input validation. Common types of injection flaws are SQL injection, command injection, LDAP injection, Xpath injection, and XML injection. SQL injection, where attackers insert malicious SQL code into a SQL database to provide unauthorized access to private data. Command injection is an attack in which the goal is execution of arbitrary commands on the host operating system via a vulnerable application. LDAP injection is an attack used to exploit web-based applications that construct LDAP statements based on user input. Similar to SQL injection, Xpath injection attacks occur when a website uses user-supplied information to construct an Xpath query for XML data. XML injection is an attack technique used to manipulate or compromise the logic of an XML application or service. Broken authentication. Broken authentication is the breach in the authentication procedure of a web application. Broken authentication vulnerabilities are plaintext passwords in transit, plaintext passwords at rest, weak passwords, single-factor authentication, password guessing, man-in-the-browser attack, and session hijacking. Plaintext passwords in transit transmits a clear text password via an HTTP connection, then user's password will be communicated in plaintext and at risk from eavesdropping. Plaintext passwords at rest means that anyone who looked through the database would be able to just read the user's passwords. Weak password is a password that is easy to detect both by humans and by computer. Single-factor authentication is a process for securing access to a system, identifies requesting access through only one category of credentials. Password guessing is the process of attempting to gain access to a system through the systematic guessing of passwords. Password guessing can be prevented by using a CAPTCHA. Password guessing can be prevented by delaying subsequent login attempts after each failure. Password guessing can be prevented by locking out the account completely. Man-in-the-browser, MITB, attack utilizes a Trojan horse in a pre-infected device/system to infect the internet browser, and sniff, capture and modify information as it travels between the user interface of the infected browser and the internet. Man-in-the-browser attack can be mitigated to do not install browser extensions or add-ons from untrusted sources. Man-in-the-browser attack can be mitigated to keep your operating system and browser up to date. Man-in-the-browser attack can be mitigated to install and update anti-malware. Session hijacking refers to an attacker's ability to take over a portion of a session and act as one of the participants. As users interact with a web application, Application needs to keep track of which requests came from which users. Session tokens are used to connect disparate HTTPS requests to a single user. Session tokens can be compromised by guessing and brute force. Guessing: secure session tokens must be generated by a cryptographically secure pseudo-random number generator. Brute force: secure session tokens must be long enough, at least 128 bits. Session tokens must also be invalidated when the user successfully logs in and logged off. Sensitive data exposure occurs when an application or program does not adequately protect information such as passwords, payment info, or health data. Sensitive data exposure vulnerability. Transmission of sensitive data in the clear. Lack of appropriate HTTP security headers used to mitigate the possibility of man-in-the-middle attacks. Incorrectly configured HTTP headers. Weak ciphers. Storing user passwords in plaintext. Extensible markup language, XML, is a standard, platform-independent markup language that defines format rules for encoding data. An attacker could abuse XML features to carry out denial of service attacks, access logical files, generate network connections to other machines, or circumvent firewalls. XML mitigation techniques. Using a less complex file format. Ensuring XML parser library is current. Properly configure XML parser and disable security-sensitive options. Using positive server-side sanitization to validate input and prevent malicious code. Application firewall monitor for XXE attacks. Broken access control occurs when a server does not properly validate every request. Server validates users' access to an admin page, but does not validate the post or get from that page. An attacker with knowledge of the post or get URL bypassing the validation. An attacker who tampers parameters can bypass validation. Always check the identity and authority of user to perform the requested operation on every request. Security misconfiguration can happen at web application, network services, platform, web server, application server, database, frameworks, custom code, pre-installed virtual machines, containers, or storage. Preventing security misconfigurations. Default accounts must be disabled. Unnecessary features and services must be disabled. Error reports must be logged. Security headers must be enabled and properly configured. Cross-site scripting, XSS, is an exploit where the attacker attaches code onto a legitimate website that will execute when the victim loads the website. Cross-site scripting, XSS, attacks can generally be categorized into two categories: stored and reflected. Stored attacks are injected script is permanently stored on the target servers, such as in a database, in a message forum, visitor log, comment field, etc. Reflected attack: victim clicking on a carefully crafted link, for example in an email or another website, that sends the attacker's malicious script to the target website. The mitigation is to never trust user input. Using components with known vulnerabilities. Keeping an accurate inventory of all the components of web application is important. Automated vulnerability management tools to scan web application and detected packages against a database of known vulnerabilities. Exploitation of insufficient logging and monitoring is the bedrock of nearly every major incident. Logging must capture all relevant events. Logging must record details. Logging must be centralized. Logging must be immutable. Monitoring should alert when limits are exceeded. Cross-site request forgery, CSRF, is an attack that forces an end user to execute unwanted actions on a web application in which they're currently authenticated. Cross-site request forgery, CSRF, attacks specifically target state-changing requests, like transferring funds, changing their email address, not theft of data. Cross-site request forgery, CSRF, token is a unique random value that is prevent cross-site request forgery attacks.